Welcome to episode 1 of the Team Room podcast. I just got done recording the conversation with the guest and it turned out even greater than I expected. The show is filled with insights ranging from his background and special mission unit Milsim to leadership and mission making. It's an exceptional tour de force conversation that I hope will help out everyone in the Milsim community overall, not just within Arma. If you like what you hear, then be sure to do the typical YouTube video stuff. Like the video, share it with your unit or any other people that you think would enjoy it. Subscribe and click the bell for notice when new episodes drop. And comment your thoughts on the interview or even what unit you are representing while listening to the show. Also, in the description is a link to the Academy Discord server. That server is geared towards the teaching and learning of Milsim topics. The Academy is an organization that is behind this show and any of the future shows from this channel, hence the name of the channel. So without further delay, let's dive into the interview, and I hope you enjoy. My first guest today is, like I said in episode 000, it's a pretty cool guest, and I've worked with him before with Naval Special Warfare Development Group Red Squadron. And the guest is SO2 Shifty. Shifty is currently the leading Chief Petty Officer at Bravo Section at Red Squadron, but was formerly slotted as Bravo's heavy weapons guy. Regarding his NSWDGs that he's picked up, he has Point Man, Special Operations, Combat Medic, Tactical Surveillance Operations, Heavy Weapons, Communications, and Freefall Parachutist. When I was active duty with the unit, I had the opportunity to work with him in operations and trainings, and it was a blast. And he's a top-notch Tier 1 Milsim role player, and that's why I wanted him on the show. So without further ado, let's get on with it. How's it going, Shifty?
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
All right. So, like I said, happy to have you on the show. The first show, kind of a bit experimental, but I've also kind of done this before, but it's been a minute, so we'll see how this goes. So let's first start off with your history with Arma 3 Milsim, like how you got started and progressed to get to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I started playing Arma in general back when I was 16 years old. Currently 27, so that kind of goes to show how long I've been around. But started when I was 16. My introduction to Arma was through DayZ. So started playing the DayZ mod back in Arma 2. Met a guy who was a former Marine, and he kind of became my mentor, taught me a lot of things, and he introduced me to Milsim. And that just kind of progressed over the years. Arma 3 came out, got into Milsim doing that. But yeah, for the most part, my started back in the Arma 2 days and has just been kind of steadily going on till now.
So, with a mentor, was that person that springboarded you to want to get involved in Milsim?
Mm-hmm.
So what was your first Milsim experience like?
So it's actually kind of funny because what we did in DayZ at the time, we did a role play Milsim type unit, but in kind of a post-apocalyptic scenario. So my first introduction to Milsim was very not what we're used to nowadays, but it kind of fit the dynamic of that. Afterwards, though, when DayZ kind of started to die down, we transitioned to actually doing kind of your no shit Milsim unit, emulating Marines, XYZ, so forth and so on.
All right, so you transitioned basically from the DayZ environment to the Arma type sandbox environment. So
Yep.
with the Marines, was it just regular Marines, or what type of Marine unit did you guys portray?
Yeah, so we were portraying the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, currently a actually real life deactivated unit. They were called the Walking Dead. And it was funny because we were 1-9 in DayZ, The Walking Dead, if you get it, the show, zombies,
Hmm.
all that stuff. But then we also emulated them when we went to the actual real Milsim side of things, and we were the 1-9 there as well.
Gotcha. So how'd you? I mean, obviously you stuck with it. So like, what made you want to stick with Milsim like through all these years after that initial experience?
Yeah, so I think it was just ultimately, getting a good feel for camaraderie, getting a good feel for, guys that are going to have your back. On top of that, at a really early age, like I said, I was 16 when I started this. My mentor at the time kind of gave me those leadership roles that actually transitioned and helped me out in real life. So learning a couple of things from this game that I could also apply to some of my day-to-day action was really helpful growing up. Um, so that kind of helped me and gave me that push to want to continue, but also pass that on. So, there are people out there in the world that never got the opportunity to serve or, medically, whatever it may be, has had come up in their lives and they missed out on that golden opportunity to serve their country. But they still want to emulate it in some regard. So I've kind of made it my goal anytime I'm in a milsim to help those people that want that opportunity and want that experience to get that.
Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, one thing that you touched on about like how like you started this out pretty young at 16, uh, and how you were able to use some of the different like principles and skills from Arma 3 and actually use it in real life. Um, that's one of my favorite things about this game is like how you can transfer like real life stuff into the game and like be successful, and you can transfer like stuff that you learn in a game into real life and be like successful in different areas.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree. It was really shocking, right? Because I got so motivated at one point, being 16 years old, being introduced to this whole military background, I decided to join, right? So I joined the Marine Corps myself, and coming out of boot camp, meritoriously promoted to private first class. Coming out of SOI or ITB, which is Infantry Training Battalion, I was meritoriously promoted to Lance Corporal. And a lot of that had to do with the knowledge and things that I gained from the Milsim. Number one, I had a mentor, right, who was one for one a Marine. So he taught me a lot of stuff, right? Gave
mhm,
me some tips and tricks, gave me some things that I could be successful with. Um, but that knowledge and that skill, not a lot of guys are joining the military these days with that skill set or with that knowledge. I distinctly remember a scenario where, in Milsim, in Arma, I'm having to call in 9 lines, right?
mhm,
And lo and behold, I get to ITB in real life and they're teaching us 9 lines, or they're going over like a quick practical on 9 lines. And right there, right then and there, I'm able to spit a 9 line, no issue, on the radio. And they're like, why the hell do you know this? So I just always thought that that was super interesting as to how a lot of this stuff can kind of one for one go into real life and be transferred information wise.
yeah, it's a pretty good deal. Um, so Daisy transitioned from Daisy into like an Arma 3 Milsim. After like, how'd you transition from that unit to your next unit, and what was like your next unit like?
Yeah, so my next unit after that, I kind of started to get into that special forces mindset, right?
Hmm.
At this point, I was in the Marines myself already, but there was a unit that this was kind of during the era of Arma 2 getting ready to transition to Arma 3 because Arma 3 had just come out, but there were no mods or really anything for it at the time.
Hmm.
Played with US SOCOM. Great group of guys. It had a combination of a multiple different SOF units. So we had a SEAL team, we had a Ranger battalion, We had a Marine Raider group, right? So we had all different types of soft-related communities in one conglomerate, and each one had their own mission set, but we all worked together to kind of achieve similar goals, which I thought was super interesting, and it actually was really successful for quite a long time until its ultimate fall.
Hmm. How many people would operate on mission days?
I mean, we were looking at 40 plus people in ops, and but we're not talking about we're all doing the same objective. Marine
Hmm.
Raiders could be off on some side of the map doing something else. SEALs will be doing a completely different mission, and then the Ranger battalion is doing something completely different. So it was always, dynamic. We weren't always all convoluted in the same area. We were really kind of doing separate goals that all work together to achieve the common, commander's intent.
Hmm. I've noticed there's not too many units that do that, and for people to able like for people to be able to have an experience like that, they have to just join a unit and hope that the unit does like joint operations or trainings with other units to
Hmm.
get an experience similar to that. I think when I was looking for a unit before I ended up joining Red Squadron, there was a unit that had like several different, like they had SF, they had I think Rangers and SEALs, um, but I didn't end up going with them because they didn't really look too cool. But it did look interesting having all these different like elements and teams working together.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is there has been a generational shift in how milsims are portrayed from in the past when I first started to how they are now. Back in the day, like you would see a lot more yes or no sir type milsims, a lot more structured, a lot more, um, you know, I'd say hyper realistic in the way that they would go about their mission sets, and that was something that attracted a lot of people. Um, Not to mention, Arma wasn't this very mainstream game back in the day. I think YouTube has kind of helped bring Arma the limelight, and people are, a lot more different types of people come and play Arma now. So
Hmm.
there has been that generational shift in Milsim where we're stepping away from the yes or no sir type units, and we're getting into more of those like casual Milsim, everybody wants to be a bro type thing. Um, which isn't terrible. It's not bad. We just have to remember that at the end of the day, you want to Milsim. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's all sorts of different types of like scale of, I guess, role play immersion that people take it. And
yep.
I mean, I haven't been in the community long enough to like notice that type of shift. I've only been doing this I think like 2 years or so.
Mm,
So it's always been, I guess, more towards like the bro side of things.
yeah.
In my experience. So after that U.S. SOCOM unit, where'd you go from there?
I think at that point, when US SOCOM basically collapsed, it collapsed because I think at this time, Star Citizen was coming out and like everybody was getting super ramped up for that game.
Hmm.
So the unit commander was just like, yeah, we're going to go do Star Citizen, but the game flopped and whatever, right? This was also at the same time that Arma 3 was coming out, so there weren't a whole lot of mods that could help people milsim the way we've been milsimming. So I think at this point I took a pretty long break from Arma um, until I got back into it because Arma 3 was starting to actually get mods made for it. Where did I go? It has been a while, so I got to think back to like 2013. What milsim did I join?
Well, that's not too long ago.
Yeah, it is. Um, I want to say that I joined a Raider group with a friend of mine who's actually in Red Squadron now. We've been friends for a while since then. Um, Iceman. Uh,
Yep.
Yeah, so we joined, or I joined a Raider group, was where I met him, commanded by a guy named Mitchell. Really solid group, played with them for a while, but they had a couple iterations, so it wasn't just the Raider, the first Marine Raider Battalion forever. I think it was like Second Marine Raider Battalion for a year, and then it collapsed, and then they came back, and it was the first Marine Raider Battalion again. So I went through a couple years of that kind of cycle of Marine Raider unit. Okay, Marine Raider unit died. Okay, we're coming back, but we're going to be retasked or rebranded. So yeah.
All right. Two things. So, like, to backtrack a bit. So when you went from that your initial Milsim group that went from like DayZ to Arma 3, and then you decide to make the jump into like an SF type of Milsim experience, why did you choose to make that jump?
Couple reasons. So in the so in the standard infantry type units, right? At the time, like I said, it was kind of that yes sir, no sir, all that kind of ish. Everybody's, there's less camaraderie, there's less of that brotherhood type feel. Everybody's just kind of a number. You show up and, you know, you just go. And you're always constantly told what to do. There's no critical thinking. Um, so the shift that I wanted to make was to kind of get into more of a more mature environment where, you are kind of given a little bit of leeway as far as, how you problem solve your situations. I think that's the one thing that soft related communities should emphasize, in the past, in the future, whatever it may be, is, focus less on trying to tell everybody what to do all the time and give them that opportunity to be problem solvers. Um, so that kind of is why I made that shift from the standard infantry to the more SF community. Because, like I said, coming out of the Marines, coming out of boot camp, I feel like I know the basics of what these standard infantry units are offering. So I wanted to expand my knowledge and expand my skill set.
Fair enough. Yeah, I personally agree with like everything you just said about that's why I made the jump from like my first unit, which was an infantry unit. It was because I wanted something where I don't know, like people it was a smaller group of people, so it was like more of that camaraderie like you said, but you also have
Mm-hmm.
to use your brain more because when you get to like the special forces or like different special operation some units, the missions get more difficult and it's not just patrolling with like a platoon or like seize this town or whatever. Like you
Right.
have to do more critical thinking. So
Yep.
yeah, that mental shift, yeah. I think that happens for most people when they want to go for special operation Milsim units.
Yeah, and like anybody that's looking to get into Milsim or has an interest in it, I always recommend that they start out at a standard infantry unit, get that feel for those tactics, get that feel for how the environment is, learn those basics and those fundamentals, and then transition into an SF unit. A lot of times I see guys are applying to units and they have like 12 hours in Arma, and I'm just like, you're going to get way too overwhelmed way too quick because you're still trying to figure out this game that has 3,000,001 keybinds. And then on top of that, now we're adding in all these extra tactics and things you got to track, as well as other mods and all this other craziness that the base game doesn't teach you. So get good with the base game, learn Ace, learn either TFAR or Acre, and get comfortable with those before you kind of get into these, these SF communities that these guys are offering, because a lot of them aren't going to take all that time to teach you everything you need to know. That's what those standard infantry units really thrive at, is teaching you basics and fundamentals.
Yeah. One thing I noticed. I mean, yeah, never mind. We'll talk about that later in a different section.
Okay.
um. So, you went to SOCOM, then you had a break, then you went to the Raider group where you met Iceman, and you've and you were with them for a little bit for some time while they were going through some iterations of who they were like replicating. Um, Up to that point, what would you say are like were some key things that you learned having spent like quite a few years in the Milsim community?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Um, it was kind of a struggle, right? Because coming from actually having real life experience now in the Marine over those couple years and picking up on that stuff, um, it definitely felt like it was less about me learning stuff and more about me trying to impart my knowledge with people. So that's where I really started to kind of develop into these bigger roles where I had guys, um, coming to me for knowledge or coming to me for advice. I kind of shifted at this point into that role of my mentor, right? That I had. And I'm helping kids with tips on what they can do to survive in boot camp or whatever that may be. And I just was kind of trying to give as much as I could to make sure that people were having fun, number one, and also number two, learning some good stuff. I'd say this was probably one of the most impact it had on me was learning how to actually be a good leader in my real life stuff, right? Because I could take like being in Milsim, right, and doing Arma 3 missions on weekends was good practice for me having to actually go lead in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Because these guys on this team speak, right, in this unit aren't here by contract, right? So you want people to follow you, you want people to want to do stuff for you. Um, Out of their own volition, right? Not because you told them to, but because they just want to make you proud or they want to do things for you. So it was kind of at this point where I started to learn a lot of that and how to get away from the whole scream in your face to get you to do stuff and get you to do stuff because you know it needs to get done and giving you a sense of responsibility.
Yeah, it's more of not like a brute force way, but more of like a proper. I mean, it's not really manipulating, but in a way, it is sort of manipulative, but in a
A little
productive
bit.
manner
Yeah, a
of
little bit.
yeah,
And,
getting
and
everyone.
there's a quote by Dwight Eisenhower that I love, and it's leadership is the art of getting people to do something you want done because they want to do it. And I remember seeing that quote on the walls in ITB, and it kind of hit me right there. And I was like, okay, that was a really cool quote. I'm going to remember that. But later on, I was like, bridging the gap because Marines have a very big tendency for being like rah, rah, rah in your face, fucking scream, all that kind of shit. Like we see the videos, the boot camp, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But after the fact, after you're out of all that and you've been in for a little while, I don't want to sit there and scream at you like you're a fucking kid all day. I'm gonna give you the respect that you give me, and hopefully that'll allow for you to get what I need done, and you can do it without much supervision or me having to hold your hand the entire way. You'll do what you know you need to get done because you know it needs to get done.
Hmm. Yeah, and like how you said that you used Arma as like a sandbox to like test with like leadership and whatnot. Um, I think, I mean, that's I've thought like outside the game, I was like a leader of like a group that I was a part of, and I had that click of that it was like an extracurricular thing, and I was a leader of a group, and I had the click that this, I mean, it's real life, but at the same time, it's just an extracurricular, and it's not like a huge deal. So it's basically a playground where I can test different things that I read, watch, and whatever. And as long as I like, I mean, I can fail, but because it's not like a truly serious thing, the failure doesn't really mean as much. And as long as your failures aren't like huge, it's fine. And as long as like the growth of your group is upward, it's fine. So having that mindset going into Arma 3 that yeah, it's a game you can pew pew shoot or like do strafe runs with your bird or whatever, and it's a good time with your friends. But also at the same time, it's a sandbox game, so you can also apply like different real life principles to it and test it out on real people and see if it
Hmm.
works. So like having that type of mindset, like you mentioned before, is really useful and will help you in life. Because like it's not that often that you have a playground where you can test leadership principles and see if they fail, or like A/B test things. Like people pay for opportunities to like do that type of stuff, but we have
Yeah.
this game where we can test it on all these people. Um, so like thinking that way helps, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean this and the cool thing about it is that even with Arma, right? Like I'm not just learning how to be a good military leader. You're learning how to be a good leader in general.
Hmm.
There's a couple good principles that you can pick up on from milsimming in Arma that'll transition to you being the fucking, general or the manager at your Burger King, right? Or the fucking manager of your bowling alley. It doesn't matter, right? People management is the same across the board, and you have to approach it that way. Is that nobody's going to stick around for you if you treat them like shit. Never ask anybody to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself, right? And then, like I said, that quote from Dwight Eisenhower, develop that sense of responsibility in people so that way they feel just as invested in the success of the goal as you do. Because you know that it's your ass on the line if the job doesn't get done and you're put in the leadership position. So you want to develop a sense of responsibility in everybody else in that team so that they want to see the success just as much as you.
Yeah,
And
like
those principles alone transition to anything you do in life, not just military.
yeah, just another. I mean, the military way is I don't know, just like using those broad principles. It's the military environment is just the way that they learned it, in
Yep.
that like confined space, but it's still applicable. Like you have Jocko that has his own like consulting company that he's using his military principles that he learned in the SEAL teams, and he's using it successfully to help real life private sector businesses. And there's all sorts of other like just enlisted and officer people that are using their skills that they learned in the military as far as leadership and all that stuff in the private sector. So yeah, it's not just like a narrow minded, oh, right, this is just for the military type of thing. It applies to both realms.
Yeah.
So after the Raiders, where'd you go from there?
I think the Raiders were kind of up and down for a little bit. There was another iteration of Red Squadron that that kicked up some dust at the time. Iceman, I think, was also there as well. Run by a guy named Laverta, I believe. Um,
Laverta. I know him.
oh well, yeah, there you go. But yeah, that was like the first iteration of Red Squadron that I joined. Kind of got me into the whole SEAL deal. Um, and then that unit flopped, and then there was, another one that popped up, I think. Um, so yeah, I got into the whole SEAL team thing with that Red Squadron with Ice, Laverta, some of those guys. I think in that unit I was a pilot. I wasn't a ground guy.
Hmm.
Um, just goes to show, like, I've over the years I've done so many different roles. Like I've been a ground guy, I've been an air dude, I've been a tanker. Like it doesn't matter. I've done it probably. Um, but yeah, that's where I went there. That unit was alive for a little bit, but ultimately, the standard cycle of Arma units is spin up, super motivated, everybody's ready to go. That motivation starts to die down. People stop giving their input, people stop doing work, and then, unit die.
Hmm.
And it is tough to carry these units on your back by yourself because there is a lot of stuff that you got to do. I think people don't realize that sometimes is there's a shit ton of stuff you do outside a game to make it really fun inside a game. for those 2 hours, right? Those 2 hours that you maybe spend in game came with 8+ hours of shit that you did outside of game.
Yep.
But I kind of strayed off the question. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good, man. So you were at Red Squadron, and where'd you go after that?
After that, I think I took a little bit of a Milsim break again. You'll notice that's a common theme across guys who've done it for a while. You just kind of got to take a break away, play some different shit. And then I came back to what is now the 72nd Airborne, not a SF related community, more standard infantry. Um, and yeah, I was there. That was the unit that I was in before I got into um, this Red Squadron now.
So, what was your experience like after all those, like, all the time that you spent in the special operations, I guess, like Milsim community, then going back to the regular army, if you will? What was that like?
It was tough because you're used to having an expectation level of your peers to be at a certain threshold, right, a certain level, and then you get there and the standard is a lot lower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you get in and you're just like, okay, maybe I can do something to help here. Maybe I can institute some trainings. Maybe I can get some balls rolling here to facilitate, getting the the general unit knowledge to a higher peak. Um, but I think ultimately with that unit, they were a very casual milsim, which coming from my past and history in milsim, I just couldn't do because they're too casual for me. Um, no offense to them, been doing what they've been doing. That unit's been around since 2013, and they've been going strong. So more power to them. It just doesn't fit with what I'm looking for in Milsim.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, came to Red Squadron, and now I'm here.
Right on. So why'd you like? What brought you to Red Squadron?
Iceman, another common theme. Yeah, no,
um.
he. I think I messaged him and I was just like, "Hey man, where are you playing at right now?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm with this group called Red Squadron. You might know a couple of the guys." So you know, came over and yeah, saw some familiar faces. Hummel was one of them. Um, One thing I didn't mention is that there are a lot of like quick units that you join, but I wouldn't even consider them like units I was in because like I was maybe there for like a day and then I was like, yeah, I don't know if I agree with this.
Yeah, those don't count.
Yeah, so I didn't even consider adding those in there because I spent no considerable time there. Um, but yeah, so I met some familiar faces back here at Red Squadron, and yeah, Ice was kind of my intro to this unit.
Right on. Um. Yeah, I guess we went all the way from the beginning up to the present. You have it's a lot of experience. So you did. So you've done regular army. And then you've done um raiders, and then seals.
That
Yeah,
was my dog. Sorry.
very good. Yeah, that's a decent amount. So I guess yeah, next section. So for there's individuals that are going to be listening to this that don't necessarily know like what tier one milsim and Arma 3 or what like SMU small mission unit milsim is like within the Arma 3 community.
Hmm.
Um, so how would you describe what like SMU roleplay is like within this community?
So what you're looking for, what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot of that very close, very tight knit, very small mission scale. We're not talking about let's go invade a country type stuff. We're talking about a lot smaller. We're talking about a lot smaller type scale unit cohesion deals. Um, Direct action missions, HVT secures, Those quick, fast, and in a hurry type missions where you get in and you get out. With that, there's a lot less worry about, oh, wear this type of specific uniform set. Like as long as your camo follows the general suit of what we're doing, you're fine. Carry what weapon you want as long as it's within the parameters of the weapons that we allot for, and you know, expect to not have everything handed to you on a silver platter. You're going to be dealing with a lot more individual problem solving scenarios and tasks that you have to be up for. So if you're looking for somebody to hand you the answer all the time, SMU is not going to be for you, or SMU Milsim is not going to be for you.
Yeah. And for people, like, I'm no expert at all. So for anyone that will, like, go into the comments, if people even choose to comment and say, oh, yo, BioHaze, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, shut down your show. Okay. But based on my understanding, as far as, like, what a small mission unit is, it's tier 1 units. So in the Army, you have Delta Force, or the unit. Within the Navy, you have Naval Special Warfare Development Group, which is SEAL Team 6. Within the Air Force, you have the 24th, I think it's STS, I think.
Special Tactics Squadron.
Yeah. Where they attach to, like, the direct action folks, like the CAG guys or the dev crew guys. And then also in the Army, you have the RRC, which I forget what that stands for, but
Regimental or Ranger Regiment Reconnaissance.
yeah,
A Regimental Reconnaissance Company, I think is what it was.
Yeah. Yes, it's something like that, but they're also tier 1. So those are like SMUs, if you will, like small mission units. I think there's another one, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But different Milsim groups within Arma, or even in like Squad or whatever, that portray those different like specialized units. That's in the realm of SMU Milsim, or tier 1 Milsim.
Yep.
So what would you say is the difference between a solid ground soldier from like an infantry division and a solid operator within an SMU, as far as like their mentality and their skill set?
Yeah, so I mean, to kind of put it simply, your solid infantry guy from a standard unit is going to be a really good follower, right? They know how to take orders, they know how to, execute on that. A really solid operator is going to be a really good leader, but is following. So, what I mean by that is that there's that reactive versus proactive mindset. And a lot of times, when you're in those standard infantry units, you're reactive because you're waiting for somebody to tell you what to do, and you don't go off and go do it yourself. You may know exactly what you need to do, but you don't go do it until you're told, right?
Mhm.
Whereas in these SF related communities and the operator status kind of stuff, um, everybody's expected to know what needs to get done, and they create their own internal plans to achieve that mission. So not everything is laid out cookie cutter for you in the operator realm. Um, so that would kind of be, the big thing I'd stress there is when you're in those infantry units, you're a really good follower until you get into those leadership positions. But when you're in an SF unit, you better expect to be at any given time put in a position where you're running the show, and you got to know what you're doing. No one person should be the only person with all the knowledge in an SF community. That shit's fluid. Everybody should know what everybody else knows and pass that information along. So that, hey, if Hayes goes down, Shifty can pick up the ball and keep the mission moving.
Yeah. And like, it is that way for a reason, because if you're in just regular Army, you're probably in a squad with like 8 people or whatever. And that's broken down into 2 fire teams of 4 or whatever. So if one person goes down, it's not like mission critical, if you will. Because
Yep.
you might be operating in a platoon, so you have like two or three other different squads within like your AO that will be able to assist you. But if you're operating with four guys and one goes down, that's 25%. Like that's 1/4 of the team down, and then then there's another person that has to help them, so that's half the team that's down. Um, so that's why it's critical that you have to like learn different people's roles, and everyone has to be a leader and fully understand the mission, because you might not be like the highest ranking individual or the leader, but the leader might go down, so now you're leading. um so yeah, that's to add on to what you're saying. That's what I'd say.
Yep.
So let's see, how would you recommend someone get to the level of joining a unit like Red Squadron, both mentally and skill wise, to be a perfect candidate in like a selection pipeline?
Yeah, 100%. Big couple things. So get very comfortable with ACE, right? ACE medical system, everything ACE related in Arma. Get very comfortable with Acre or TFAR. So those radio systems, how to talk on a radio brevity, meaning brief conversations that you can have on the radio. If you're sitting there spewing sentences on sentences about whatever just to get a quick piece of information out, that's something definitely to work on. And then, land navigation, being able to do terrain association is huge. I can get put on a map with a map and a compass and figure out where I am. I don't need a GPS. I don't need any of those things. I can use actual military tactics like a resection to determine my location. So learning little things like that are going to really make you stand out in these units, because that's a lot of the stuff that they're going to test you on. It. Can you get from point A to point B without all of this cool gadgetry? Can you shoot, move, and communicate? Right. So are you accurate when you shoot? Can you talk well? Can you convey your message on the radio effectively and efficiently? If you can do those things, I think the door's open for you to get in, right? But and that's where you're going to learn unit specific stuff, because every unit's going to do their shit differently. So, but those things stay consistent, right? Shooting, moving, and communicating, ACE medical, the ACE system, TFAR or Acre, whatever it may be. No one unit's doing radio transmissions a completely different way than another, because they all come from the military, and the military does radio transmissions a relatively specific way. You may learn, you know, a 5 line instead of a 9 line, but that's because in Arma, a 9 line isn't as applicable, right? And if you don't know what a 9 line is, Google's your friend, figure it out. Um, but yeah, so if you can shoot, move, and communicate, if you know ACE Medical, if you know your radio system, TFAR or Acre, I think that, and then last but not least, that land navigation piece. If you know those consistent things, the rest can get taught to you, and you just got to be a sponge for that information.
Yeah, similar to like how it is in real life based on the different interviews and readings I've ingested. They're not like in the selection pipelines, they're not testing you on your ability to do exactly what you will eventually be doing if you make it through. Like they're not testing you on how well you are like an operator, because that's what like operator training course or OTC or whatever it is. Like that's what that's for after the selection process.
Mm-hmm.
So they're testing you on your ability. Well, I mean, in real life it's a bit different. Like they're willing to see how far you're willing to push yourself and other things. But they're testing you to see like to make sure you have the fundamentals, and testing to make sure that you're like teachable, because after the like selection or onboarding process then becomes like your initial training of like you might go to green team or you might go to OTC depending on the unit or whatever, where they will actually teach you what you need to know. So going
Yeah.
into like a lot of these different like Milsim units, you don't need to know everything. Like you don't need to know how to do like interventions on vehicle from like air to ground, or like how to do combat diving, how to do jungle warfare, be perfect at CQB, surveillance, like any of that stuff. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be good, really good at the fundamentals,
Yep.
and be willing to learn and soak up information, like you said, because you'll learn a lot. Um, so yeah, um, you basically just answered my second question after that. So, well, that basically sums up like SMUs within like the Milsim spectrum. I'm not really sure how it works with Squad or other military simulation games. I'm sure it's similar, but I'm just talking about within the Arma universe. This is how it operates. Um, so next we got like the different aspects of like SMUs. So what is your experience with like different selection processes and onboarding pipelines at like tier 1 units?
So man, I've seen all different kinds of spectrums, right? Like I've seen the units where they will no shit in a selection make you do physical PT, and it's like I stray away from those, right? Because I'm not gaining any tactical knowledge or any benefit from pressing W with my guy to have him run around and roll around in the sand. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry. But there I've been in units that have done that, right? That's part of their selection. Run an O course, right, which is an obstacle course. Essentially, you're just gonna run around, jump, vault, climb a ladder, climb down a ladder. Like it's not teaching me much, but there are selections where they have tested your critical thinking ability, right? So, for example, I'm going to give you one stick of demo. There's going to be 3 fucking vehicles in this spot, right? I want you to blow up all 3 vehicles with that one stick. There's 2 trains of thoughts here, right? The one person's going to come in and they're going to be like, holy shit, how do I blow up all 3 Vics with one stick of demo? And they're all spaced out, right? But then there's the other train of thought of, I'm just going to move all the Vics closer together so I can blow them up, right? So I like it when units do stuff like that, where they actually put you in a position where you have to figure out something to get the task done. There's no clear direction. Hey, go move these 3 vehicles together and then blow them up. No, it's blow the 3 vehicles up with that one stick of demo. Figure it out. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Um, I love it when units do stuff like that, because that right there is where you're really starting to test and measure how this person will operate in op, right? If they're faced with a task, are they going to sit there and be like, what do I do? Or are they just going to do it and then figure out the repercussions later? And I think that's huge for these selection processes in these SF communities, is doing things where your critical skills, right? Critical thinking, problem solving. Um, we live in a day and age where Google is your best friend and can answer 99.9% of your questions, but people will still sit there and ask you for the answer. Um, and I think that in these Milsim communities and these SF communities specifically, they're looking for the people that can figure it out for themselves without being told exactly what to do.
Yeah. I will say, like, I think I said this before, but there's different levels of roleplay within like you have like regular infantry and then SMU at the top or whatever, as far as like skill set. But within those different like skill sets or like different units, you have different units that take it seriously, some that are doing it just so then they can say that they are able to do like hostage rescue or different cool high speed things that Delta does. So you have different like SMUs that some take it very seriously and some don't. And that will like you'll notice that within like their pipeline. Um
Yeah, you can always judge a unit on their pipeline.
yeah.
If a unit is not super worried about how many people they get in and how many spots they're filling up, but more so the quality of the people coming in, and there's a actual barrier to entry, you know you're joining a solid unit, right? But if you're joining a unit where your boot camp or your selection or whatever it is, right, whatever your training is, oh, you show up 1 week and you're done, you're probably going to be dealing with some bottom of the barrel type guys, because there's not that big of a barrier to entry. Now that's not to say that they may have some follow-on trainings that are really good and train their people up. But I think one of the big allures of SF units is that barrier to entry, that you know that exclusivity of it all, and being able to feel as though, holy shit, I made it here, and I'm here a part of this unit because of my skill, not because of they taught me this and then I passed the course. It's what I know got me to this point, and my ability to receive information and act upon received information got me to this point.
Yeah. If yeah, basically. Like if you're going through a pipeline and you're realizing, wow, this is a breeze and I don't really have a lot of experience, then you have to realize that they're probably letting a lot of people in. And if you're fine with that, then cool. But if you're looking for something a bit more selective and their process is easy, like if they say that they're like an SF unit, like a Green Beret SF unit, but their process is just as easy as a infantry division pipeline that you did like before, then the quality is not going to be as good as you might expect from an SF unit. So yeah, the pipeline is not just for the the unit to assess you for selection and for you to get trained up. It's also for you to assess the unit and make sure that you're not going to waste your time through their pipeline and then get in, do operations with them and realize that it's not exactly what you expected. It's just like a
Yep.
regular job interview. I feel like a lot of people go into job interviews thinking that it's them interviewing you as a candidate, but it's kind of both
Two
ways.
ways.
Yeah, where you're
Yep, it's
just
two
like
ways.
assessing them to make sure that this is the right place for you. Like you should go with questions and whatnot. Like every selection process I've gone through, besides my first one, because it's like my first time in Milsim, but I've always came with questions of like, how do you run like this? Do you guys do this? How's the leadership like? Blah blah, like what mods you use, blah, like all that stuff to like get a gauge on them while they're like putting me through their pipeline and figuring out what I'm about. So it goes both ways.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
so regarding the training, after like the selection and say that you make it through the selection, you'll have to like do different training. Like I probably say almost all Milsim units have like reoccurring training that happens. They don't just do operations; they also like add in some training. Um, so what is your experience with training inside SMUs?
So, I've seen two different types. I've seen the unit that they're the weekend warriors and they'll show up on Saturday, do an op, and then leave. And there's not much in between that and the next op day. The other side of it is that I've seen units where they want to hold a lot of training, but there's a balance. This is a game, and a lot of times we have to we have to measure the fact that if we're asking people to spend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday here, they're not getting much real life time to do stuff. Um, so there is a balance there that has to be found. I think Red Squadron does a relatively good job at that. But the struggle with coming up with training is repetitiveness, right? Unfortunately, we're on the internet. We're playing a video game, and hate to say it, but like 99% of people are like ADD, right? May not be fully diagnosed, but there is that attention that you have to kind of try to maintain to keep people engaged and interested. And if they're showing up week after week and they're kind of doing the same stuff, there's going to be not a whole lot learned, retained, and it's going to become where your trainings become lackluster and not a lot of people are showing up to them. Um, so, you definitely got to make sure that you are varying your training and always do something like take your training and just do this, right? Think of a practical skill that you want people to be good at. Let's say hostage rescue. Okay, so how we're going to handle hostage rescues, we're going to do XYZ, boom, boom, boom. You teach it. Okay, cool. Now what we're going to go do is we're going to actually go do some practical applications. So we're going to go do some quick FTXs, live fire scenarios where you're going to get in there. You're going to have to, use what we just taught you, and you're going to get assessed on that. But change it up, right? Don't just do CQB every single week you come in. That's not gonna. You're not gonna achieve the same results because it's gonna become cookie cutter, and people are going to drone out and stop coming or stop paying attention to actual new information you're trying to teach. I use the story of the boy who cried wolf, right? He cried wolf, he cried wolf. Then the wolf actually showed up and nobody wanted to listen. It's kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I've so I mean, this even happens in Red Squadron where um like the training could be the same after every week and it can kind of get stale. So how would you suggest fixing I mean, you kind of just offered a solution, but on like if I were to play devil's advocate, I mean, it's not really the devil, but like on the opposite side of things, I would think that the reason why they would do that over and over again, like hit the shoot house for like an hour of a 2 hour training every single week, maybe it's because they're not like the leadership doesn't think that they're proficient enough. So that's why they keep repeating the same training over and over again. So how would
Cool.
you
Then
fix
tell us
that?
that. You know what I mean? It's like if I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people lack in SMU units is transparency. This kind of strays away a little bit from the training, but it'll tie back in. But transparency is huge, right? Because in these tier one units and these SF units, every single person that's in the unit knows what's going on, training wise, operationally, gear, everything. Everybody's a part of that planning process. And, if we're doing something because command doesn't see that we're doing it well, but none of us know why we're continuing to keep doing it, we're just going to sit there and be like, well, this is dumb because we're just doing the same thing over and over again. But if you tell us, like, hey, we don't see that proficiency enough, we want to see this improve and this improve. Okay, cool. You just gave us goals. Now we're going to try to hit those goals so that we know what your intent is. Um, and if you're not conveying your intent, that's where you're going to lose people. And that's why I said it ties back to training, because every training event can't just be training for the sake of saying we're doing training. Training has to have intent. So I want to make sure that everybody knows how to do military free fall. So we're going to do some training on military free fall. Cool. Does anybody have any questions before we get into training? No? Okay, cool. Let's go do this real quick, knock it out. And then once we can verify that, we'll go do some live fire event, whatever it may be, right? But you gotta just you gotta relay your intent to people on what you want achieved, and then we go achieve it. Not just, hey, we're gonna go to the shoot houses again, just to do the shoot houses.
Yeah. And like another reason why I believe they do it is because you always have like new people, like at least for Red Squadron, like we have new people cycling in after getting out of Green Team. So
Mm,
like they haven't done any CQB training within the team, but the guys on the team have like done it several times already.
yeah.
So yeah, you'll have to revisit it because I mean CQB is vital to like what we're doing. So you have to like show it to the new guys. And whenever you get a batch of new guys, you have to like show them how we do it in the team and flow. So, I mean, you just
Yeah,
have to
and
like go ahead.
I agree, but I also kind of disagree, only because, like, so don't waste everybody's time to teach one guy something, right? It's like we have 7 days in a week that you can get on. You can schedule anytime you want with that one individual and say, hey, want to bring you into the server real quick. We're just going to go over some quick things about how we do this in the section. Bada bing, bada boom. Cool. But don't make everybody else in the section have to do what they already know over and over and over again to appease that one guy. Same time, too, you don't have to be the only one to schedule it with them. Delegate, right? Hey, Shifty, can you get with, SO2 or SO3 Haze and teach him how we do or CQB in Bravo section? Cool, no problem. Gotcha. That'd probably be the biggest, my biggest hiccup with what we just talked about, because I want to make sure that people feel like they can delegate their tasks. No one person has to carry everything on their shoulder.
Mm-hmm. And I know that there's some units that like document all of their like tactics, techniques, and procedures, so then like the onboarding process is easier for people that are willing to like go on their website and read the docs.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's another way that a unit can like help with that onboarding process. Um, so selection process, training. So regarding the different operations, which is like why a lot of people might want to join SMUs because they get to do cool stuff. Um, so what type of operations have you done in like your SMU experience, and which ones or like which types have you enjoyed the most?
So I always think that any operation I've done that has instituted something slightly new or something slightly out of the minutia of what you're kind of used to, which is go in here, clear these buildings, and yeah, call it a day. Those have always been the coolest ones to me. Like I think in Red Squadron we have the MRH tools mod, which allows for us to like actually hack stuff and gain information and intel. So anything that allows us to do those kind of out of the box missions, Arma 3 added in a brand new aspect, which is the amphibious side. So diving, doing stuff like that. There's that advanced diving emulator mod or the advanced dive mod. Um, those are the ones that I always find the most interesting because it's something new. And that's just for me speaking because I've done it for so long, so I've kind of seen everything. I've seen the HVT captures, I've seen the CQBs, I've seen the vehicle interdictions, so I know how those go. And I've always had fun with kind of learning something new or doing something new in these ops. I will say probably out of all missions that I like the most are the like rescue this person or capture this person, because there is that kind of that teeter totter of fuck, do I get put into a scenario where I have to cap this guy, or am I going to get him to comply with what I need to do and we can bag him and tag him, take him home? Um, so I always thought that those were like super fun because there's that dynamic to it. Uh, one of the things I really appreciate that Red Squadron does is they actually utilize their Zeus operators as people in the game to roleplay with. So when I have to go capture said HVT, I'm having an actual conversation with a person and not just the AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you say there's any like cons to the like mission set that SMU units have?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you're going to come across is that they can generally go faster. They're a lot more small scale. We're not fighting, full militaries of people. We're fighting maybe, a platoon's worth of guys in the area. And in the Armaverse, one shooter can probably take care of like 3 to 4 AI himself, right? Or let's give it a range of like 3 to 5 AI himself. So you have to weigh that in, right? We have 10 people showing up for the op, right? And that's a low number, but 10 people showing up for, which means we have to put out 50 different uh, AI for them to engage or shoot. Um, so the ops can go quick if there's not those follow-on missions. If our mission was just to go bag and tag this guy and then get the fuck out, we could probably complete that mission in 30 minutes. But with all the work and time that goes into making these missions, that's kind of a minimal return on your investment. So that's where I think there's a struggle with balance of doing too much or doing way too little.
Right on. All right, so we've hit the about like 1 hour mark. Do you have more time that you could spend, or do we have to wrap it up for you?
I have a little bit more time, yeah.
All right, cool. So we have two more sections left that I wanted to hit, which was mission planning and leadership. Those were like some of my favorite things. That's why I saved it for last. And then we'll have like the lightning round at the end. So hopefully we'll have enough time to. I mean, I have plenty of time, but it's all on you if you have the time. But yeah, we'll cover those things and then we'll call it a day. So regarding mission planning, I mean, as any person that has done it before, it's like they could probably attest it's not necessarily a very easy thing to do, but it's something that's really vital for the operation or mission to be successful, no matter like what Milsim unit you're a part of. So, what experience do you have with mission planning?
Whole lot. Um, from a very early age in the Milsim time, I was put into like a platoon leader position, right? So developing ops, I've been doing that stuff since I started Milsim back in 20, what was it, 2010, I think. Um, so yeah, I've been doing that for quite a while. Anything from the SF side to the general infantry side. Yeah, plenty of experience there with that.
What would you say is I mean, it might be kind of obvious, but what's the difference in mission planning for a regular infantry and a special operations unit?
So the cool thing with planning for an SF unit over a actual like standard infantry unit is less planning, right? I can put less on a map for an SF unit because the expectation is that they're going to figure out the rest themselves. I just lay out like a general commander's intent of, hey, I want to go here and take this sector, and then I give it to those other people, like those section leads, and I say, hey, get with each other, get with me, and we're going to hash this thing out together. And they can go through and develop their own internal plans for the sectors that they were designated. Um, so it's cool to do that in that regard. And then in the standard infantry side, you're kind of more outlining everything specifically. So like you're writing a 5 paragraph order. One of those paragraphs is the execution paragraph. And in the execution paragraph, you're kind of specifically writing which squad is doing what and going where and doing what at what time.
Right on. So there's a lot of like different acronyms or abbreviations for different ways you can think about mission planning, such as like MENT-TC, or there's one called like Cake that I read about the other day. At least I think it was
Mm-hmm.
Cake. Um,
Oh, a Coke?
yeah, probably that. um, so like, is there any specific acronym or abbreviation that you tend to like go towards when mission planning, or is it something different?
It really depends on the mission set, like what we're doing. But yeah, like the Oacoke is a really good one because it basically outlines, or another one that you may have heard of. It's similar. It's like Okakoa. There's the way this one acronym is specifically spelled is different every single time, but the way I learned it was Okakoa, and it stands for Observation and Field of Fire, Avenues of Approach, Key and Decisive Terrain, Obstacles, Cover and Concealment. And if you really think about it, right, like when you're planning an op or when you're coming up with something, that right there, those observation and fields of fire. So, can the enemy see you? Can you see the enemy? And if so, what's your radius, right? How from left to right, how much of the enemy will you be able to see from X position, right? And then you got your avenues of approach. How are you going to get to your target? What route are you going to take to get there? Key and decisive terrain. Do you have hills? Do you have trees? Do you have cover or avenues to use to your advantage. Give yourself some elevation over the enemy, obstacles, what's going to prevent you from getting to your objective, and then cover and concealment, right? Kind of ties back into that key and decisive terrain. So these are all the things that you kind of are always thinking about when you're mission planning, or if you're on the fly and on the move right then and there. Okako is one of those things that you're always thinking about. METTC, more so you're thinking about METTC when you're doing like the pre-plan.
Can you just say like what all those letters in METTC mean for the layperson?
Yeah. Yeah, so it just means mission, like what the mission is, who the enemy is going to be, the terrain and weather that's going to be there, troop information as far as like what the troop's going to be doing, time available, and then civilian consideration. So a lot of that stuff, right? You're going to know a lot of that shit before you're even boots on the ground.
And most of that goes in like the con op that you're given from like
Yeah.
the mission makers.
Yep. Con op. So for those that don't know what a con op is, concept of operations. And then there's like the actual 5-paragraph order or an op ord, operational order that you're given. METTC is going to more so be in the operational order in the actual first paragraph section.
So say that because I know this will apply to many people, because in a lot of situations you don't have a lot of time to plan a mission. But say that you're just like given a verbal brief of an operation. What type of questions would you want to ask? I guess like what type of questions would you want to ask like the mission maker after he gives you the brief of like like what specific things would you want to know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're assuming that like we haven't been told this already.
Yeah, so like say they just give a brief, you guys are gonna go here and you need to just kill these people and leave. Like say that was a brief. Like go to this town, Alpaca, there's a commander there, kill him, and then leave. Like if that was a brief, like what type of backup or additional questions would you have for him or her?
Yeah. So, I'd ask like, what time are we executing this op? Because that determines if we're going at night, we need night vision. If we're not, we don't. What civilian considerations are. So if we're going into a town that's going to have, civilians walking around, that heavily shifts the way we approach the operation. We're not just going to go in guns blazing. We're going to really have to PID our targets and make sure that
what does PID stand for?
Personal identification. So
right.
Basically, it's a quick way to say ID that somebody's friendly or foe.
Yep. All right, continue. I just wanted to clarify that in case someone didn't know.
Yeah, gotcha. So yeah, I said what time that we're going to be there, civilian considerations, and then also like what are we going to be allotted to get in and get out? Are we going by air? Are we going by ground? Those are the kinds of things that I'd definitely want to know, because I just want to know how we're going to get there, how we're going to get out, what time we're going to be going in, and then do I got to worry about civilians being in the area? Outside of that, like I can look at a map of the area to figure out terrain and avenues of approach and all that stuff myself. But those are the big things that I'd need to know to execute my mission either which way.
All right, so say that you had like I'm trying to like orient this towards people not in a hardcore or like really serious Milsim environment, but they're still trying to do Milsim, but it's kind of loose. So they have like a brief that's not like in depth. So like that's why I asked you about like the different questions you would want to ask for clarification. But say that you have like you were given that brief, you ask the questions. Like, would you have any tips on how to structure your people that you're leading? Say that you had like 8 people with you. Like, would you have any tips on how to structure your people for mission success for like a variety of different missions?
Yeah. Always want to have So first things first, you always want to get your medical guy, right? Super crucial individual to have because they determine whether people live or die, right? Everybody in the team, everybody in the squad should have a decent amount of medical, but you always want to make sure that you have that one guy that's carrying that above and beyond to get everybody up quickly. You're also delegating to that individual that they're in charge of everything medical. So casualty collection points, right? Where we're going to pile people up. If a lot of people go down and are injured, here's where we're going to go to get those people taken care of, right? So CCPs, casualty collection points, same thing. On top of that, always want to make sure that you have your chain of command developed. So if you go down and you're leading the op, who's going to take over after you? Who's going to take over after that guy? So forth and so on. You want to make sure that you have anti-tank prep, demolition brought. Um, at least get one guy with some kind of automatic squad weapon, so that way he can, suppress the enemy and open up with that rapid rate of fire on your targets. Outside of that, um, you're just starting to get really specific, and that depends on the mission. But that's kind of the cookie cutter. What you need, every op, all op, SF, standard infantry, doesn't matter. You want those roles filled. Somebody doing medical, somebody to take care of armor, and somebody to take care of demolishing buildings, enemy weapons caches, whatever it may be. And then yeah.
All right, so that's pretty good advice there. So regarding like getting in to the AO, getting on target. So like for insertion into the AO, or infill onto target, or exfil off target and extraction out of the AO, would you have any tips on how to like figure out the best way to figure out like your transportation or like how you'd go about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely depends on the AO you're going into. If your AO has a heavy anti-air presence, you're not going in by bird. Pretty much determined for you. Um, if your AO doesn't have a heavy anti-air presence, then you could probably, you know, land right on top of the fucking place and get your troops in there quick. Do an air assault is what it's called. Um, but that also depends on the concentration of troops in that area. So if it's heavily concentrated with a lot of people, you're not doing an air assault because that's just going to result in your pilots getting shot to shit, you guys getting shot to shit, and it's a bad day. Um, if you're if there's not a heavy anti-air presence and you guys want to come in a little bit more low pro, you could halo in, right? So have your, um, C-130 fly off about a click away, or do a hey-ho for that matter, right? High altitude, high opening. You can drift in from a further distance, keeping your presence heavily masked because the enemy doesn't know that you're there, because your chute opened way higher and you drifted onto your target DZ or drop zone. So that's another option. Those are kind of the airways to get in. If you're looking to get in by ground, you know, I always try to stage like a vehicle staging point, probably about like 500 meters to a click away, generally in some kind of concealment or cover, like trees, bushes, whatever it may be. And I always try to park it behind like a hill. Reason why is because I want to use that hill as an observation point to get eyes on the target if it's close enough.
All right. So regarding like one of the key things in mission planning is assessing the terrain. So are there any specific things, okay, besides like bodies of water, are there any specific things that you're going to be like looking for when assessing terrain at a target or around
Yeah,
a target?
I want to stay out of valleys, right? Because valleys are, you're basically in the middle of two massive walls of terrain, and the enemy has the advantage on you because they can just shoot down at you, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Hmm.
There's not really many ways you can maneuver out of valleys. It's tough. So either stay on one side or the other of a valley, never be right in the center. Um, Outside of that, there's not too many terrain features that I'm looking for. Obviously, like I said, I want to use hills to develop observation points so that I can see into the target. Um, that's really about it for terrain considerations. Outside of that, like I'm looking for shrubbery, I'm looking for green on the map because that's quick cover and concealment that we can use to maneuver towards. And anytime I can see like a tree line that leads us directly into the target, that's most likely the route I'm going to take because we can quickly get behind the trees if we need to. It masks us from anything looking at us above. Um, so yeah,
All right.
the biggest thing, I guess the biggest thing I can stress is don't run blind into your target. If you have the capability to use ISR, which is basically just surveillance, you got a drone up on a rotation that can mark stuff for you, or let you know where the big concentration of enemy is. Take that step and do it. Don't skip that step because you don't want to wait. That can make or break your op. Because if you're running in and you didn't know that there was a T-72, which is a tank, sitting in the middle of the place, and you're not prepared to take care of that, now you're kind of fucked. So
Yeah, you want as much like intelligence and reconnaissance done on the target or like within the AO as you possibly can.
yep.
Helps the decision makers. So, I mean, that's obviously a lot, and it's stuff that you've learned over a period of time, and I'm sure many failures and testing and whatnot. Do you have any recommendations for anyone that is trying to get better at mission planning? Like any exercises that they can do or anything like that?
Yeah. So play the damn game. Like get in there, get some guys, and literally just say, "Hey, we're gonna do this plan. Test it. See how it goes." All right. Delegate your guys to what their tasks are gonna be, and just go do it. There's not one specific thing that you can do that's gonna get you better. It's all trial and error, and you're gonna find out what works good and what doesn't work. Um, it's really hard for me to say, if you go do this, you'll become a great leader. You just got to kind of get in there and find your momentum and find what works for you and how you're going to be successful doing what you can do as a leader. Um, there's plenty of good missions that are already made, like Hearts and Minds is a great one because it actually gives you tasks, like different missions, like go kill this officer, right, or go help this medical emergency. So the task is already assigned to you, the mission's already made. You literally just have to gear up, suit up, get to your target, and get away from your target and complete it. But inside of that scope, you have to plan, you have to come up with your approach, what you're going to do when you're there, actions on, actions off, exfil or exfiltrate, leave, the whole fucking thing. Um, so try to find those game modes like that challenge you and give you consistently changing tasks so that you can work that brain and get the ball rolling on developing that cycle of operations with how you're going to approach planning your missions.
Yeah, and if like another thing is that if you're already in a Milsim unit and you're trying to get better at mission planning, like even if you're not at a leadership like spot, like you're not a fire team lead or anything, but you're trying to get better, just like try to, I don't know, like open up your eyes to and ask more questions of, well, why did my SL have us go this way, or why did the colonel plan or the major or captain or whatever plan for us to assault from this direction instead of this direction. And if it's a cool thing and allowed in your unit, you can even like go and ask that person, like the people that plan that mission, and try to figure out like why they did what they did. I know in some units that's not cool because they're probably several ranks above you and an officer, and that's, I mean, they might have like a command structure and like work your way up the ladder first, but in some units you can talk directly to like the captain and ask those questions. But
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to approach. You know, if you come up to an individual and you're just charging them up on what they did and why did you do this way and blah blah blah. Like number one rule: never question somebody in the middle of an op on what they're doing. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that backseat leader mentality. So don't do that. But if you come up with the approach of just like, hey, I'm working on things to get better in leadership or whatever, wanted to ask you a couple questions based on your experience of what you've learned over time.
yeah,
You're hardly going to find anybody ever tell you no, fuck off.
yeah, like, and plus, like, you wouldn't like go up to a leader in the middle of an op and ask these questions. In the middle of an op, you would be looking around and thinking and asking yourself why my SL or fire team or whatever chose this decision. Then maybe jot it down, and then after the operation or in the debrief, ask them about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a lot of juicy information for mission. I mean, it's not, we didn't cover absolutely everything, but as far as Arma goes, that covers a decent amount. So as far as
Yeah.
leadership, which ever since I've been in 3 Milsim units, my first one was a joke. Second one, second one was my first jump into like an SMU. It was like a task force type thing, and I was dev crew operator. But that's where, oh, man, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. That's where I learned that leadership. I guess I even learned it. I didn't. I guess I learned it, but I didn't really know I learned it. That leadership is vital. Like no matter what the unit is, how cool the people that you operate with, at like your level or whatever. Like if the leadership is not good, it will revert to being a piss poor experience for you. It's kind of like mean reversion when you talk about like the stock market or whatever. It's always just going to revert back to the mean, where the mean is the vibe of the leadership. It might be like really cool, like you said before, with like the cycle of like joining a unit. It's like really cool in the beginning, but then you start to realize the vibe of like leadership. It might not be good or whatever. So I learned that if the leadership is shit, then um yeah, you might want to consider leaving or try to help remedy the problems, um
Yeah,
because it's not going to work out.
anybody that's a leader that's not willing to talk to their lowest individual in the unit, right? They need to definitely just kind of recheck and refat, like check the fat, right? It's not you're not making yourself look cool by being this, standoffish, don't talk to me, you're not worth my time type. Like that era of things is long gone. So if you're that was my dog.
Oh, you're good.
um if you're in a unit where you're seeing that your leadership is like that, then you know kind of check what's going on and why you're there and what really is making you want to stay. Because leadership should be fluid and leadership should be have an open door policy where you can come talk to them. Nobody on the internet is worth that amount if they're doing these milsim units. So if they're playing the whole "don't come talk to me because you're a recruit" type deal, you might need to find somewhere else to go because you're not going to grow there.
Yeah, and like the thing is, it's like there's so many different units. Um, like even if you go to like the Steam discussions of like people where like people can post their units, like there's plenty of units on like that page, like plenty. So I mean, it's fairly competitive. But, like if you're not happy at one, you can always go to another. But at the same time, if you can also like fix, if you're in the position to like fix problems, then try to fix it. If you believe if you fix it, things will be like really cool and you'd enjoy the experience. But
Yeah.
so regarding leadership principles, I know like at Red Squadron we had a leadership seminar by ICE where we talked about principles. But what are some of like your leadership principles that you think are needed to be a good leader? I mean,
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say. So the cool thing is that the my time in the Marine Corps, like you learn a couple things. There's two ones that I think are super important. So there's JJ did tie buckle, um, which is what's called like the 14 leadership trait, essentially. That stands for justice, judgment, decisiveness, integrity, dependability, tact, initiative, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance. Um, it's kind of it's an acronym that a lot of Marines are very very familiar with because they make you recite it word for word all the time. So it kind of gets stuck in your head, but it kind of shows you the traits that you need to embody and employ when you're talking to people, when you're making your decisions, when you're doing what you need to do. This is what you should emulate all the time. So there's that, and then there's the actual 11 leadership principles. um, I think that these are huge because they pretty much signify what you need to do to be the best leader you can possibly be. Some of them, for example, I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's like set the example, right? So you don't just tell people to go do things and then not do it, right? It's like, hey kids, don't smoke, and then you go light a cigarette. Don't be that guy. Um, keep your team informed, right? Nobody wants to sit there and play this whole, oh, I'm just going to be in the dark the entire time and then, aha, I'm going to show up on game day and figure it out. Like, tell people what the fuck's going on. Keep them informed. Um, develop a sense of responsibility among your team. I think earlier on in the podcast, I was talking about that. Like, develop a sense of responsibility in people because then they're going to want to do and see the success of what you are asking them to do. Um, yeah, so 11 leadership principles and JJ did tie buckle are two huge ones. I suggest you go give them a read and look into them because they will pay dividends in what you can learn over an hour. These break them down for you very easily.
Yeah. You can also just like break, find a list or a PDF of an explanation of them and just do like a self assessment, an honest self assessment of like how you'd rank yourself in each one of these, like the different principles and traits and whatnot. Um,
Yep.
and then you'll know which ones you have to work on. But the key thing is being honest about like your assessment, because if you're not, then you won't change.
Yep.
So regarding like HQ leadership of like leading a unit. So like in Red Squadron, I'd say like you have Dare or Hummel. Although Hummel is also kind of operational. So I guess more like Dare, where he doesn't really operate. He's just like pure leadership. Um that leadership versus like a ground leadership of like the section chiefs. Would you say there's any difference in the key principles needed to be a successful leader in either one of those, or are they like the same?
It's pretty much the same. It's just you're kind of employing them differently in the fact that you're not the one, if you're like the HQ leader guy, right? Like you're not the one directly on the ground controlling your guys. You're kind of giving, if you're the HQ guy, you're kind of giving general ideas of where they should go, and then you're letting them figure it out. Because these guys are in a leadership position, they don't need to get the answers handed to them. Um, how they conduct themselves, you know, slight differences as you start to step up into that more HQ level. Like you got to kind of conduct yourself as professional as you possibly can. You know, it's okay to laugh and joke sometimes, but if you're always the dude laughing and joking, you're not going to get taken seriously. Whereas if you're like that squad lead, you're more closer with your individual guys, so it's slightly okay for you to kind of break that barrier and be a little bit more chummy with them because that's how you get them to respect you. That's how you get them to want to, you know, continue working for you and doing what they're doing. So there is kind of a slight dichotomy, but it's not super different. At the end of the day, a leader should always act like a leader, and no two leaders should really, well, two leaders are always going to be different, but what's expected out of them should never differ.
Right on. So to wrap up the leadership section before we get into the final lightning round, um, if someone came up to you and was like, "Yo, Shifty, I want to become a better leader in Milsim. What steps or what resources should I look into, or like, yeah, what steps should I go about becoming and progressing to become a better leader in Milsim?"
Yeah. So YouTube is huge. There's a couple things that you got to be really good at, right? Is first off, before you're starting to step into leadership, make sure you're good at your fundamentals. So you got a good grasp on ACE, you got a good grasp on medical, you got a good grasp on radios, you got a good grasp on simple battle drills. So how to react to contact, how to do a squad attack, how to break contact. Those key things, be good at those from an individual level, then start to break them apart even more and look at them from how would I lead a squad attack, right? So if I'm running a battle drill one squad attack, or a battle drill one alpha is a squad attack. If I'm running a battle drill one alpha, how am I leading this, right? Because you got two fire teams, one support by fire, one's attack, or one's the assault. So what steps am I taking to lead this? And like I said, YouTube is huge because it can literally, you can Google a lot, or you can type in anything and there will probably be a video on it. I remember seeing multiple videos on all the battle drills where they're broken down for you step by step, and you actually have people walking through and doing it. So doing that is huge. And then, like I said, get in the game, play, learn from your mistakes. And, if you have somebody that can be a mentor to you, get that person on your fucking team. Um, if somebody knows what they're doing and have been a leader for a while and they can kind of observe you in your leadership and what you're doing, I think that's going to be the best tool, because you can know everything in the world, but you can still be a shitty leader. So yeah, I'd say those are probably the best things that you can do: is master the fundamentals, get good at playing the game individually, be the best individual that you can be first, and then take that and expand it to, now how do I employ this in a squad or a team based setting.
Yeah, I think it was Jack Swag or Swig. He was an African American Navy SEAL officer, and now he's at University of Illinois in their football or athletic program. But he said that it takes a shooter to lead shooters. So, and I most definitely agree. Like, in order for the people below you to like take you seriously, you have to be like very good at the fundamentals, or else they won't trust you.
Yeah, if I'm better than you, right? If I'm better than you at your job, then why the fuck should I listen?
Yeah.
It's just kind of the name of the game, is survival of the fittest. That Darwinism, it's kill or be killed. So if you're not the best at what you do, then you're not going to get the respect of guys who are already better than you.
Yep. All right. So now for the lightning round, there's 5 questions. I mean, you're they're going to be a surprise to you because this is the first episode, but for the next guests that listen back to these previous episodes, the questions are going to be the same. Um, so it won't be a surprise for them. But uh, top books, manuals, documents you'd recommend to anyone related to Arma 3 Milsim.
Oof. uh, Man, I'm not really a book reader.
I'll add in YouTube channel since those, like you mentioned YouTube a lot. It's like
Okay,
any
yeah.
like
So
YouTube
like
channels.
Tactical Riflemen, I like them. They uh they show a lot of good different little things like shooting drills, sniper communications, takedowns on a doorway. Um, I think that it can apply to Arma in a slight way. It's not like 100% one for one, but you can pick up a lot of things from there and learn some new little ways about how they do shit. As far as other kinds of things, honestly, a lot of what I learned from was real military experience. So it's hard for me to say like I read this book and learned a lot of stuff for Arma. Like I actually had the one for one training in real life. Um, and as far as publications, it's like hip pocket training stuff I've done. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of shitty at that question.
Oh, you're good. I mean, there's no shitty response to that. Um, so what do you do outside of Arma 3 Milsim to keep yourself entertained?
I fly planes in DCS. I enjoy that a lot. Every infantryman should have been a pilot. You know, that's it's kind of the thing that you always regret is you go in infantry and then you see pilots and you're like, fuck, that's so cool. So yeah, I fly DCS and then, you know, spend time with my wife and my dog.
Right on. Have you had any? Well, you kind of already answered this before, but I'll allow you to say it again. Have you ever, or have you had any mentors that have helped you along your Milsim career? If so, who and how have they helped you?
Yeah, good old Smith, Craig Smith, former Marine. He was a mortarman, infantry. Uh, Taught me everything I needed to know to be successful. One day I told him I was actually going to join the military, and what he taught me one for one translated, and I was very successful in my military career.
Would you say, like, how different would you be if you didn't have a mentor?
I probably wouldn't have stuck with this game that long, to be honest. I probably would have never gotten introduced to Milsim, and yeah, Lord knows what I'd be playing right now. This is the longest standing game I've played, so yeah, I think before this I was playing like Call of Duty Zombies with friends on my PS3 or PS4. I don't remember.
All right. What do you know about the Milsim community today that you wish you knew about when you were first getting started?
Oof. um, Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. Like I appreciate the journey that that I've kind of gone on with Milsim and how over the generation it's changed from being kind of the yes or no sir to now. I wish when I was okay, I will say this. I wish that when I was younger, I would have known more of the more mature ways to handle people and situations that I do now back then. Because being a young 16-year-old kid and getting told that you're the boss of a bunch of people kind of goes to your head, and you kind of get David or David Torres weird. That freaked me out. But yeah, that's my answer to that question. I don't know.
All right, fair enough. And I also think you kind of mentioned this within the middle of the interview, but what advice would you give to someone who wants to join like an SMU unit like Red Squadron? Let's say that like they've already dabbled in like the base Arma, they understand like base Arma stuff, and they want to like get to like Red Squadron or like another SMU Milsim.
Yeah, just don't come in with the attitude that you know everything. Like I said, I've been doing this for 11 years, 12 years now. And when I joined Red Squadron, I was a sponge, wanted to take in what they were going to teach, even though I probably could teach them back their own buds before they taught it to me. So just make sure that, even though you feel you may know something, don't be that asshat that comes in and acts like he knows everything. Be receptive to new knowledge, be receptive to knowledge you may have already learned, and just go with the flow. If you're trying to join a tier one unit, most likely their pipeline is going to be longer than a week. Just be prepared for that. And remember that you just got to stay motivated and that there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Once you're done with their selection and their training, there's a shit ton of fun in store for you. You just got to get there. Don't expect inspiration. And if you don't get it, you cry and leave.
Yep, for sure. Yep. Well, that was a lightning round, and that was the interview. Um, Let's see, it's been an hour and 43 minutes. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on. Um, what did you think of the interview or the conversation?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, a lot of good questions. Really think it's going to be beneficial for people that are in the Milsim community or looking to get into Milsim. To listen in and kind of learn some of the tips and tricks with somebody who's been doing it for a while and can kind of tell you where not to go and where to go to be successful.
Right on. Well, thank you. And we might have you on. Well, I won't say might. We'll probably have you on for a later episode to go more in depth in some of these things that we touched on.
Sounds good.
All right.